What's going on YouTube? Today is a special day. We get to tear apart our bottom end a little bit here. We're going to be checking out the rod bearings. So this motor has got about 5 to 6 months of pretty hard racing. It's seeing a regular 30 to 40 pounds, 50 pounds here and there. So as you guys know, my last 2.4 motor, it didn't have a good end to its life. It was together about 1.5 years. It had a lot of abuse from the 72 millimeter and ran great and did a lot of racing. And changed the oil regularly, but the rod bearings are gonna get beat up with these steel rods. And I pushed it a little too far and didn't change them out. And one stuck, and once they stick, it broke the rod bolts and threw the rod outside the block. And then the rest of them were just tore up. My mains looked pretty good for 1.5 years. So what we're gonna do is we're going to drop the oil pan and we're just gonna pull rod bearings. It's not too bad. Number one's a little difficult because it's near the oil pump. You gotta kind of have to get at an angle to get the rod cap out, and it's a little bit of a bear to get the bearing halves back in, but it is doable. I've done it before. So let's get at it. I'll show you guys how I check rod bearings, and we're gonna go ahead and replace them with some new ACLs. What I got in there right now is I got a standard and an X half. And from my wall there, it looks like we were aiming for 2,500. So that's what we're gonna do again, depending on how they look, which I'm hoping they look good. I think probably the coating will be worn, and it might be a little bit into the first layer, but hopefully not, we'll see. So. All right, guys, so you can see the difficulties of rod one. We have the oil pump, and you say, well, just drop the oil pump. Well, I can't because the chain is on the front, and it won't loosen up enough to drop the oil pump. So what you have to do is you gotta get this on an angle like this to get the rod bolts out and pull the cap off. And it's a pain to get the rod bearing back in, but it is doable, and I'll show you guys how doable it is. Hey guys, well, I'm actually pretty happy. Here's our bottom half, and it has a little bit of that micro layer starting to deteriorate a little bit. Coating's mostly gone on this one. Yeah, it looks pretty good. And then here's the top cap. Less coating worn, and it looks pretty dang good. I mean, it got a good bit of coating left, and then of course in the center, that's where the force is at. And minimum scarring, which means I must put together a motor pretty clean, because there's really no scarring, so there's no trash in the block, so that's good. And this is also number one, and number one is typically the worst one because it's the last rod to get the oil. So typically number one, because number one was the one that went through the block, and a bearing was destroyed. And I remember the further back I went, in the block, the better the bearings looked. So number 4 actually looked the best. So if that's the worst bearing out of the 4, we're golden. Number 4 is probably gonna still have coating on it. So I'm gonna go ahead and put new bearings in number 1, clamp number 1 up, and then we'll continue down the line. I don't like to pull them all at once. I don't wanna get confused. You cannot mix up your caps. And since the motor's in the car and the rods are in the car, I can't mix these up. So I'm just gonna do one at a time. Pull number 1, Put a new bearing in, tang to tang, throw it back up, torque it. Number one is a bear to get to though. It sucks. 2, 3, and 4, probably be done in 2 minutes. Number one's probably gonna take me a half hour just because it's so hard to get my fingers up in there, and I kind of have to use some tools to kind of get everything fitted. We'll get it up there, but it is bare, but it is doable, guys. All right, so and how you guys know, of course, what bearings in here. You look on the side, and that is a HX bearing. And then we have a standard H bearing. So we got half and half because we were aiming for that 25 thou, or 2.5 thou. So we're looking pretty good. We're gonna go ahead and throw some new bearings. Let me show you what the new bearings look like next to them. So here you guys can see the difference between, of course, these have the coating on them still, and these don't. Well, they have a little bit. But that's to be expected. I mean, we're making quite a lot of horsepower on a little, one rod here, and they're not going to come out looking like that. That's for dang sure. Not at this horsepower level. So these look good. I like the way they look. They're wearing good. My most wears are right in the center, which is where we want. That's like our timing mark. So we're looking good. I like how these are looking. All right, guys, I'm going to bring you into a live look here. I didn't want to do on number one rod just because it's kind of a pain and it takes too long, but I'll go ahead, guys, and show you number two. It's a little bit easier. So as you can see, oil pump 2, 3, and 4 are pretty easy to get to. So we got 2 here. We're gonna go ahead and break our bolts loose. All right, and then of course you gotta break the cap seal here. So spin these out a little bit, and then we'll just take a rubber mallet. We'll just do that, and that breaks the seal there. I have to do a little bit more. There we go. I'll go ahead and take the rod bolts out the rest of the way. Try not to drop stuff. You don't want to be dropping anything, rod cap, rod bolts. It's a little bit rougher, of course, underneath the car, but it's doable, guys. Totally doable. It saves you a lot of time. So now we're going to pull off the bottom rod cap, and the bearing is on the journal, which usually means it's got a little bit of heat in it. And that one looks about the same as the other one, which is not bad. You guys can see this here. Looks about the same. I'm going to go ahead and put these up on the table. Top bearing off. So what you have to do to get the top bearing is a lot of times you got to push up a little bit on the rod and piston. And then what I do is I'll just take my converter bolt here and spin the crank. Get the crank journal out of the way like that. Oop. So the crank journal's out of the way, and now I can see the bearing. Okay. Sometimes they're real difficult. There we go, got it. Boom, there it is. And the bearing looks really good, actually. Extremely good. And crank all looks good. And that's how easy it is, guys. It's really not that bad pulling the rod bearings out. And then of course, I'll show you guys how to put it in. Let's go check out these rod bearings real quick. All right, guys, so here's number 2. And honestly, they look almost identical to number 1 there. The top bearing has a little bit more coating. As you can see, it just barely started rubbing through the coating, where number 1 is a little bit more coating removed. So number 2 looking a little better, which is totally normal because number 2 is getting the oil quicker. The bottom bearing is exactly the same. It's got the micro starting to wear. It wore past the coating and now it's starting to go into the first little layer. But these look really good. I'm extremely happy. Again, these are about 6 months of racing, and it doesn't get, it's hard racing. I mean, even when I'm on the street cruising, it'll, you know, I'll see 30, 35 pounds of boost on pulls, and it's a lot of power, especially on this 8085. I mean, this sucker is seeing a lot of power per cylinder. So let's go ahead and get our new bearings and throw them up in there. So not only do you want to look at the wear, but you also want to look at the tension of the bearing, the actual grab of the bearing inside the half. So what you can do is you can put it in there, and you can even feel that it's got some tension, and then put it off to the side, then just fling it out. You see it's got that pop, that ping. That means it's still got some good tension on those halves. Okay, you hear that little ting? Here's a brand new one. Obviously, a brand new is going to have a little bit more tension. You could even hear it kind of slap in there. So here's a brand new one. I mean, a lot of tension, right? You can hear that ping. So a lot more tension on the brand new one. Of course, it's brand new. But even these, I mean, they do fall in there kind of easy, but they still got some good tension to them, which means they haven't been overheated too bad. These would probably last another, 3 to 6 months. 6 months for me is probably a little quick, but I mean, do you want to pay 30 bucks for bearings, or do you want to pay a couple grand for a whole new motor? So I'd rather do 30 bucks for bearings. It only takes me an afternoon to do them. So yeah, so that's another telltale sign, is if your bearings have a lot of heat stress on them, they'll start to lose their grab. And once they lose their grab, guess what they're going to do? They're just going to go zip, and they're going to spin, and then you're done. It throws a rod. It'll snap these rod bolts right in half, and you're getting a new motor at that point. So we're going to clean these up and install it back in the motor. So obviously, for you guys that think you have a serious bearing problem, telltale sign is looking at your oil and looking at the bottom. What you're seeing right there is some water. Alcohol is that nasty crap. Is that water alcohol, because the car sat overnight. So it's got a little bit of water and alcohol in it. But there's no material. Absolutely no material at all. This is just the stain of the oil pan. But oil looks really good. We'll be pulling the filter as well, of course, and checking out the filter. But obviously, from the signs of our bearings, filter's probably gonna look pretty good. All right, we got where are we at? Number 2. No, number 3. We're at number 3. This is our bottom bearing, I think. Let me look here quick. Yep, this is our bottom bearing. So this is in the bottom of the rod cap. And like I said, they're getting better as it goes further back the block to number 4, because number 4 gets the oil pressure. So how it feeds is it goes through the crank from one journal back to the 5th journal, and then it comes up through the back. So number 4 rod gets the first oil, then 3, then 2, then 1. So that's why 4 always looks better. It's getting a better, and when you're running a wet sump, now if this was a dry sump motor, these would all look probably the same, but a wet sump struggle a little bit more. So here's our top bearing, and look at that, the coating, the majority of the coating is still there. And this is a timing mark hitting right here. Now remember guys, I got 2.5 thousandths on these. Okay, that's a good bit of rod bearing clearance, okay? 2.5 thou. And I run 2050 bread pen. So these are looking amazing. Number 4 is probably gonna look even better. Number 4 will probably have all the coating on it still. But so these look great. Again, I could probably get another 3 to 6 more months on these, most likely, if I wanted to kind of stretch, you know, number 1 being the worst, okay, which is really not that bad. It's really not bad at all. These look pretty good. Of course, number 3 here is looking even better. We'll get 4 out here, and I'll show you guys 4. All right, so I didn't show you guys number 2 install, so I'll show you on this guy. So what we did was we already lubed up. We got the upper bearing in. We just push in with our fingers, and then we take our fingers and we just kind of lube her up real good. All right, and then what we're gonna do is we gotta push this piston back up. Be careful not to whack your journals. So push her back up. Then you're gonna take your crank and bring your crank back down so that your journal's straight down like that. You're gonna reach back up in there. Okay, I pushed it up a little too far. Can't even reach it. Let me, there we go. There we go. All right, you're gonna bring that right back down on the journal. Make sure your bearing half, you can still see it and it's still seated and everything looks good. And then you're gonna take your cap, which also already has your lube on the bearing and your lube for your bolts. Make sure you're tang to tang. So here's our tang. Here's our tang on this guy. Okay, make sure you orientate that. You're gonna go ahead, put your cap on. Cap's in there. Take your bolt that already has your lube. Slide your bolt in there. Give her a couple turns. Take your other bolt. Do the same thing. Couple turns. And you're good. Go ahead and run these down. Nice and soft. And then the rest of the way, we're gonna do it with our hands. And this thing is just dripping oil everywhere. It's super nice. It's another thing I hate about doing it like this is oil just keeps dripping and dripping and dripping. All right, so what we're gonna do now, take a small wrench and we're just going to evenly torque these up. They're going into the dowel pins that are on the crank or on the rod, upper rod. There we go, we're bottomed out. We'll take our torque wrench now, and these rods are 75 foot-pounds. So we are on 75 foot-pounds, and we won't go straight to 75. We're gonna give her a little bit of a snug, another nice little snug, a little bit more, and then go ahead and bring her to 75. And there you go. There you have it. What you can do then is take your crank and just make sure that you're still spinning good. Okay, still got nice free motion, which we do, as you can see. So next is going to be our number 4. And what I did notice too down here is that my converter bolts need some tightening. They're a little loose. All right, number 4 is gonna be super easy. Sometimes I'll just take my wood hammer and use that. Here's the other. And pull the cap off. Boom. Got bearings on the journal there. There she is. All right, so number 4 has about the same wear as like 1 and 2, which is weird. I thought 4 would be the best, but it's got about the same wear as 1 and 2. 3 actually looks the best out of all of them. All right, and here is number 4. Kind of made a liar out of me. I thought it was gonna be better. Number 3 is our best. So yeah, number 4, here's the bottom. Pretty much the same as the others. looks pretty good still. It's starting to get into the first layer. And then here's the top. Again, coating, just barely worn through. And then right at where the timing mark is at, we're getting a little bit of micro deterioration there. But hey, it looks pretty dang good. I'm happy. So I'd say 2.5 thou on these ACLs are working really well. What I might do in the future is I might run a King 2.5 thou just to see how the Kings hold up compared. It does have King mains. I can see though from when we tested, it looks like I was unable to get 2.5 thou with a King. So it looks like King standard with a King X was 2 and 3.5, where ACL standard and X was 2, 5.5. King X on both sides gave us a 2.8, and then ACL on both X's gave us a 3,000ths. So it looks like King wasn't really working for the 2.5 that I was looking at. So we might just stay with ACL. It seems like the 2.5 works. Seems like these bearings are holding up. Why change what's working? I do have a lot of bearings. I have Kings and ACLs. I have all kind of different sizes. But again, you got to find what your car is going to live with, what the motor is going to be happy with. Before we had King X, about 2 and 2/10 to 2 and 3/10. And I mean, they lasted a 1.5 years before it blew up. So they were working. I just went way too long, and it could work again, you know, but again, I like to stick with what's working. That's why I've been running Brad Penn oil forever, because just it works. It's good oil, and I don't want to change stuff that's working. Don't work on something that's working, or don't, you know what I'm trying to say. Anyways, so we are going to go ahead and drop number 4 back in, clean up our oil pan, get some Honda Bond on there, throw her back together. And we'll have oil pressure here just in a little bit, and we'll give a run down the road. I am going to go ahead and take the oil filter off, open that up. I may or may not open it. I'm probably still going to open it up, just take a look. It's always good to just kind of get a good mental visual idea on what the filter's looking like compared to the bearings. So we'll go ahead and do that too. All right, so I figured since we're under the car and it's maintenance times, we're gonna go ahead and drain our transmission fluid. And see what this looks like. Hopefully it still looks pretty good. And it does actually look pretty good. No metal filings or nothing crazy. It's looking good. I like it. All right, so we'll get some new transmission fluid up in here. All right, so we pulled these out. Number 4 had a bunch of oil even inside. When I popped it out, there was a ton of oil inside, which means it was probably leaking from the inside of it. So I'm gonna go ahead and alcohol every one and install these dry, because you want a really good seal around the outside as well, so you don't have any leakage in your spark. She's in there good. So you can see, like, look at the difference between that, look how tight those are around, and then that guy. See how wide it is? So these get heat on them, they kind of shrink up, so you can see how wide that is. So it's gonna do a lot better seal. And then all I do is I take a big socket on the flat end, and I just put it on top, and I just press until it's flush. And that's all you gotta do. All right, so obviously too, while this is off, we went ahead and in here I got some slop. That's what you want, it's perfect. So go ahead and check over your valve lash while you're in here. And if you have some tight valves, that could be a indicator that you're tuliping some valves, but everything looks really good on the exhaust side. Intake side is a little tighter, but there's still play. But yeah, everything looks really good underneath the valve cover. So we're going to go ahead and finish up our gasket and we'll be ready. All right, well, it's time to get some oil pressure. What I do is I take the spark plugs and disconnect all the fuel injectors. The reason I do the spark plugs is so that it's not so harsh on the bearings since they don't really have oil pressure. So it's also easier to spin over. So we'll go in here and get connected up. All right, so we're just gonna go ahead and turn it over. As you can see, my oil pressure's right there. I think we got fuel pressure. Motor sounds good. There it is. That's what you want to see, is a nice solid oil pressure. All right, I'm gonna start her up. She's got oil pressure. It's got transmission fluid. We're gonna have to top off the transmission fluid while it's running. Well, that is going to do it, guys. We got her running good. Had a little bit of a scare. So I had some weird oil pressure fluctuations at high RPM. And I didn't know. I thought something happened. I was like, oh my gosh, maybe I missed a rod cap or something, which I knew I didn't, but I was not sure. I went from an OEM Honda filter to a Wick filter. And I thought maybe the Wick filter had a weird pressure relief. So I changed it out for a Honda filter and it was still doing it. Well, come to find out, I ended up kind of kicking at my kick panel. That's where my ECU and all my wiring is. And when I was kicking on it, I could see my oil pressure dipping down all crazy. So at high RPM with the vibrations, it must have been vibrating those wires, causing that to show up in the logs. So I'm gonna have to get under there and figure out which one is causing it. That's if I'm even gonna do that. I have one more race and all that wiring is getting ripped out for the new ECU. So I might just leave it. It's really just for log purposes. I know the car's making oil pressure, so we're good. So anyways, guys, that's gonna do it. Hope you guys learned something from this today. It's really not that bad getting up in there and changing those rod bearings. You guys have to keep up on your maintenance on these high horsepower cars or they're gonna come apart on you every time. Well, guys, that's gonna be it. I appreciate it. Please comment, like, and subscribe. I will catch you guys in the next video. See you.